following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode, September 19th, 2024. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. So today we're going to talk about Trump. He was on Greg Gutfeld's show last night, and he held a rally in New York City. So we're going to talk about that. And other headlines coming up right now, but don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, give me a thumbs up, share the podcast. All right, let's get into the headlines. All right, first headline up today from the Washington Times. Trump jokes about taking out would-be assassin with 3 wood. The actual joke on Gutfeld was by Greg Gutfeld is if Trump would have taken out his 3 wood and taken out the assassin himself, and Trump just said, yeah, he would. Moving on to other headlines. Continuing with the Gutfeld saga, Mediaite reports Trump speaks of non-existent debate. Audience says they went crazy. I'll just read from the headline. This is exact quote from Trump. And they didn't correct her once. Trump told Gutfeld, and they corrected me. Everything I said practically, I think 9 or 11 times. And the audience was absolutely, they went crazy. Now, what was Trump talking about? Well, like when I was watching this, I said, audience, because the thing was Trump looked out into the Gutfeld audience and said the audience went crazy. But there's all different types of audiences. There was audiences following on X, following the debate live on X. There is what is called a television audience. So he didn't refer to a live audience. It's just the fact that he motioned to Greg Gutfeld's live audience. And so people might have picked up on that, oh, that was an audience. There was an audience for the debate. It wasn't a live audience, and he didn't make a reference to a live audience. So that leads me to the next headline here from Fox News. 95% negative coverage of Trump on ABC, CBS, NBC after second assassination attempt. The Media Research Center analyzed 69 minutes of coverage on ABC, CBS, and NBC newscasts between September 15th and 17th. The story went on to say that the network coverage of former President Donald Trump has been overwhelmingly negative since the second assassination attempt against him on Sunday, according to one report. And I said this many times, is that after Butler, they waited only 6 days to get back to their vitriol. And here they didn't give a pause whatsoever. And Karine Jean-Pierre even dismissed the fact that the political rhetoric coming from the Democrats and the media somehow had the effect of getting people to take shots at Donald Trump. The article goes on. Analysts at the Media Research Center review 69 minutes of campaign coverage on ABC and CBS evening newscast between September 15th and September 17th. The MRC reported that although the thwarted assassination attempt took up 70% of all campaign news on the networks, a significant amount of that coverage was negative towards Trump. All the 3 nights, we tallied 21 evaluative comments about the GOP candidate, 20 of which were negative, which computes a 95% negative spin score, said the MRC. Well, the thing is here, too, is that they're trying to encourage more attempts. So that's the thing. They keep on talking negatively about Trump, even though he had an assassination attempt against him, because they found that despite all their negative comments and their smear of Donald Trump, it hasn't really been working well enough. And so they feel that they have to double down the closer we get to the election because they need more violence against Trump supporters, in the hope, and a lot of this is in the hope, that MAGA will retaliate. Well, we learned our lesson after January 6th now, didn't we? Also, the fact is that this second assassination attempt seems strange. Now, this guy was obviously a Democratic agent or an asset, maybe even an asset of the intelligence agencies. So because the second assassination attempt is a distraction from the first assassination attempt, where there has been some nefarious findings, and we are worried about the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI stonewalling an investigation into what seems to be a coordinated attempt to let the assassin crooks take shots. So and I'm still a little bit firm in a second shooter scenario because I don't believe, if you look at the ballistics, and there hasn't been a firm ballistics report, and this is also happens when you have a dead suspect, nothing needs to be disclosed. When you have a live suspect, this is all going to come out in court anyway, since there will be no trial of the Butler assassination. The FBI doesn't need to disclose anything. So, and that's why you saw an FBI press conference after the second assassination attempt, but after Butler, there was none, and there still is none. And we still have a hard time figuring out the exact evidence of what happened. This is really a grassy knoll scenario of what happened in Butler, but I'm not going to digress too much into that. I want to try to speed through the headlines of post-millennial. Breaking: Trump announces he will visit Springfield, Ohio and Aurora, Colorado during massive New York rally. The rally was purported to be 20,000 people. We got 19,000 as an official number. So I guess the capacity was 16,000, but between 16 and 19,000 people at the Nassau Coliseum. More headlines from Fox News. Trump assassination attempt. The FBI's Ryan Ruth tip highlights vetting demand challenge. Former agent says FBI received tip about Ruth about 5 years before he allegedly planned assassination of former president. Now, this guy goes on to say, following up on the tip, the alleged complainant was interviewed and did not verify providing the initial information. So the call-in, which was about Ruth being illegal possession, since he's a felon, of a firearm, and this is when he was living in Hawaii, the complainant couldn't verify that the guy had a firearm. So maybe he just heard Ruth talking about it. We don't really know. My point being is this guy was on the radar of intelligence, State Department, CIA, and FBI for some time. So was he a useful idiot, or was he a witting participant of whatever the agencies wanted him to do? Nevertheless, he is a patsy in this scenario, which is a distraction scenario. What sniper would stick his barrel out of a blind? So apparently now we learned some additional information from Trump last night that the Secret Service agent was only 10 feet away when he saw the barrel and started shooting into the blind. 4 to 5 shots. We don't know. We don't have any independent verification that anybody heard shots. So, and we also know that the witness now we know is a woman, and she followed Ruth's car and took pictures of the license plate, and then miraculously had the text or email of the sheriff's department and emailed them the picture of the license plate. I don't know how all that goes down like that. Wouldn't you just call the police or 911 or something? So very strange. Wouldn't you just, the whole scenario is very strange. The article goes on to say, since the Parkland High School shooting in 2018, Duffy said, this is the supervisory special agent Scott Duffy, all calls made to the FBI involving a potential threat to a school are followed up on. Otherwise, it's a judgment call. The problem is that they say they want to get involved in our internet traffic so they can uncover potential threats. But then when they do so, then they say it's a judgment call. It's not a judgment call. There should be some hierarchy of particularly any threats with firearms. So, you know, if somebody calls the FBI, why they would be calling the FBI about a felon in possession with a firearm, why wouldn't these people call the local police and say, in Hawaii, and say, hey, we believe this guy's a felon and he's in possession of a firearm? Uninvestigated. Not to mention that this guy apparently didn't have any money, but flew to Ukraine and tried to get foreign fighters to fight in the Ukrainian-Russian war and to purchase drones and ammunition and weapons. Very strange. And then the guy goes on to say the tip first goes to the FBI tip center, then goes to an FBI field office, and then the local FBI is going to do their own threat assessment and then see if there's a violation of the law, and then pass it on to local law enforcement. But do they follow up? And then the guy doesn't go on to say whether they follow up or not. One American News is reporting that CNN senior political commentator criticized his own network for Democratic perpetuated falsehoods designed to radicalize. So this guy, Scott Jennings, the senior political commentator, said, I have to say, when I see what Democrat politicians are saying about Donald Trump, when I see what Democrat commentators say about Donald Trump, and their platform is built on a bunch of lies, frankly, they are designed to radicalize a political base. It makes me wonder how much they really care about the violence that you and I both agree is terrible. What do you think about that? I mean, everybody sees what's going on here. It's not, as I reported yesterday, is that there is a significant propaganda campaign going on that people see, and the only people dismiss it are people on the left, the Kool-Aid drinking Democrats that say, oh, there's nothing going on here. We're just calling a spade a spade. That's not the case at all. As a matter of fact, I think Trump's convictions are false. And I happen to be in the school of thinking that he won the 2020 election. Moving on with other headlines, though. Post-millennial, again, breaking news. Based Records pro-Trump anthem Fighter by John Kahn skyrockets the top of iTunes charts. You see this with a lot of pro-Trump songs that they go to the top of the iTunes charts. That's not surprising at all. Trump holds considerable popularity within the electorate of the United States. The fact that people keep saying, pollsters and all this, saying that it's a toss-up, it's 50-50, that's not true. The Democratic base is like 36%. You could see it with Joe Biden's approval ratings, 36, 39%. You drill down in some of these polls, you could see the approval of Kamala Harris is 36, 39%, it's in the 30s. The support of the current batch of Democratic candidates, and I'm not talking local, I'm talking about the presidential level, is very low. Compared to 53 plus, has been gaining points lately, of overall Trump support within the national electorate. More headlines from the Federalist. DOJ's Russia indictment exists to associate conservative media with Putin. I reported this very early. There's nothing really to discuss here. That the fact is, That's exactly what that is. And I'm going to get at the end of the articles today, I'm going to get to something that Christopher Wray said at the Aspen Institute. But first, I want to go to this article. Teamsters rank and file favors Trump, but union announces no endorsement for president. I'll just show you the electronic members poll for the Teamsters puts Trump at 59.6%, Harris at 34%, Harris 31% at the research phone poll, and Trump at 58%. So it's not much difference there in those readings of the poll, but the polling was split, and since the unions usually endorse the Democratic candidate, they just didn't endorse anybody, which is a de facto endorsement of Trump from the rank and file. Moving on to the Washington Times, Harris says very few companies are price gouging despite her pledge to eradicate. Price gouging doesn't exist. There's inflation, and we're going to get to inflation in just a second, and the Fed's rate cut in a second, but there's no price gouging. It's inflation caused by increased spending caused by the pandemic, which in itself, we could talk about the origins of the pandemic all day long, and that the timing of this outbreak was suspect. All right, moving on to the headlines. Federalist, census data shows Americans haven't gotten a pay raise since Trump was president. I mentioned this when people were talking about wage growth is keeping up with inflation. It definitely wasn't, because anybody who has been in the same position as a wage worker since the beginning or end of the pandemic, or since Joe Biden has taken office and the inflation has skyrocketed, most people, they might have gotten a pay raise, but it's nowhere near keeping up with inflation, because no one's getting 12% pay raises, even after all this time, let alone 20 to 30% pay raises. As a wage worker, that doesn't happen. PJ Media again, Harris tosses a fresh word salad, and it's tasty, says their headline here in this story by Robert Spencer. She said, I grew up understanding the children of the community are the children of the community, which again is circular logic. You know, all she could do is repeat the same thing. She has these canned phrases that she keeps going around to, and she tries to fill in the middle, as we saw when she was interviewed by the Black Journalists, Association of Black Journalists. She starts off with a canned phrase, she fills it up with gobbledygook, and then she ends with another canned phrase. She can't speak. She can't, with most people in the population, and I hate to be generalizing here, but most people can't speak for 20 minutes, let alone 2 minutes, without saying something stupid. It's really not encouraging, because people, that's one of the reasons I do this whole thing, is so I could practice speaking. Because it's not an easy thing to do, especially in front of an audience. In any case, going back to the headlines, PJ Media, C-SPAN caller praises Trump would-be assassins. And there's a tweet here by this guy, John Amaga, said, Democrat from LA just called into C-SPAN and called for someone to take a shot at and assassinate President Trump. He was cut off by the host after he doubled down. I cut out the rest of that article where it just went on to quote what the guy said. And he said, I'm a Vietnam vet from Louisiana. And that wasn't clear in this guy's tweet. He said from LA, that could be Los Angeles, but it was Louisiana. Who the guy said, I'm a 2-tour Vietnam vet, and Trump is ruining the country. You know, someone needs to take a shot at him. Trump isn't ruining the country. It's like, the problem is people listen to the mainstream media too much. Like my brother does, he listens to MSNBC and his favorite news show is Joe Scarborough. You're not getting the truth there. You're getting a skewed, mischaracterized version of reality. Trump didn't do it. Trump didn't do anything to ruin the economy of the world. He's not a threat, despite what people say about January 6th. That wasn't his doing, and it's arguable that was even doing of the rioters. Back to the headlines here with the post-millennial. Newsom signs series of bills to restrict AI deepfakes around election. The subhead goes on to say, safeguarding the integrity of the elections is essential to democracy and critical, and it's critical that we ensure AI is not deployed to undermine the public's trust through disinformation. Right. This is just intelligence agency speak to undermine freedom of speech. As was stated earlier and yesterday, I think it was a Federalist article, you're free to say and do whatever you want. There is no disinformation in public speaking. If you are not charged to disseminate information, let's say the media or government organs, even local government, municipal government, the police department, whatever, if you're not charged with disseminating information, then you cannot, by very definition, engage in disinformation, malinformation, misinformation. You can't. You're just a guy out there, posting something on a public forum. You're not in charge. It's not your duty to disseminate information. It's exactly what the mainstream media and organs, particularly of the Biden administration, are doing, that are engaged in misinformation or disinformation. So it's always the left, and this is their whole plausible deniability. They try to stick on to you or their political opponent what they're engaged in. Newsom's an idiot, he's an authoritarian, and say goodbye, California, you're going down. Going back to the headlines of Federalist, 99% of challenged signatures for Arizona's ranked choice voting ballot initiative are duplicates. And they go into the story and it just says they investigated, disclosed that over 37,000 pairs of signatures gathered in support of Proposition 140 are in fact duplicates, as argued by the Arizona Free Enterprise Club. This discovery now places Proposition 140 thousands of signatures under a constitutionally required signature threshold to qualify for the November ballot. In other words, more cheating in Arizona, as we just looked at the Arizona and Nevada rolls, is they've cleared over 100,000 people off the voter rolls because of discrepancies. This is why this is the real threat to democracy, is not Donald Trump, is mail-in ballots and the fact that they are not putting in place verification methods or keeping in place verification methods for ballots and voting. So if there's a recount, you should be able to verify that the voters who voted are the voters who voted and are registered properly without discrepancy. More headlines, Just the News. House asks 5 states to probe possible illegal straw donations to Democrats via Act Blue. The powerful chairman of the House committee that oversees election integrity is asking 5 states to open the investigation into potential criminal activity and the routing of hundreds of millions of dollars in political donations to Kamala Harris and other Democrats through the fundraising platform known as Act Blue. It's very powerful, Act Blue. House Administration Committee Chairman Brian Steele, a Republican of Wisconsin, made 5 referrals on Wednesday evening to Arkansas Attorney General Tim Griffin, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, Virginia Attorney General Mason Mieres, and Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody, saying a massive computer analysis conducted by his committee uncovered a suspicious pattern of donations from individuals with net worths too small to donate what has been credited to them via Act Blue, reports of the Federal Election Committee. In other words, large donations of millions of dollars in some cases are associated to donors who don't have millions of dollars. So in other words, they're using these donors to funnel what we believe, and what we believe is foreign contributions to the Democrats. Big surprise. It was like when Bill Clinton was investigated for a Chinese businessman funneling millions to him, to his campaign. Back to the headline, CNBC. Fed slashes interest rates by 0.5 point. An aggressive start to its first easing campaign in 4 years. If you know anything about economics, there's a big problem here because the larger the rate cut, the more likely that there may be, excuse me, I have to check something. That there may be, inflation increase. So what we have here is a large, CNBC characterizes it as an aggressive start to its first, because they say there might be a series of rate cuts, easing campaign in 4 years. The problem is when you go aggressive, there is a chance that you could cause inflation to tick up. Now let's talk about inflation. First, we're going to go to Mediaite. Now, crowd at J.D. Vance rally, I believe this was in Arizona. The J.D. Vance rally boos when a reporter notes rate cut will alleviate inflation for a lot of people. That's not how it works. People should go back to basic economics. The crowd at J.D. Vance's campaign rally, this is in Raleigh, North Carolina, on Wednesday, booed after a reporter asked the vice presidential candidate for his reaction to the Fed cutting interest rates, which are going to alleviate inflation for a lot of people. Really quickly, just on the Fed cutting, it's a very Wall Street Journal-y question, but the Fed cut, it wouldn't be Wall Street Journal because Wall Street Journal knows better. The interest rate cut by 0.5 percentage point going to alleviate inflation for a lot of people. And so if you have any reaction to that, ask the off-camera reporter. I'm not going to go into what J.D. Vance says, but that's not what happens. As if you were following me yesterday, it's not what happens. What happens is that when you cut rates, inflation goes up. Now, let's talk about inflation. The target is 2% for them to start cutting rates. But the inflation rate for the United States was only 2.5% in the 12 months ending in August. And the previous rate increase was 2.9%, which was almost 3%, which is not at the target rate of 2%. So, what is the problem? The problem is recession because of lack of growth. So you look at the inflation rate compared to GDP, which is tepid. So what the Fed is trying to do is spur economic growth. They're particularly worried about job numbers, which the Biden administration, as we're going to see later, has been overinflating. So this is the thing with information, and that's why you can go to jail as a corporation for misrepresenting fiscal information, because that can affect the whole economy, especially if you're a big blue chip company. Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis says the Fed's inflation target, why 2%? Price stability is often interpreted to mean low and stable inflation. To meet the price stability objective, Federal Reserve policymakers target an inflation rate of 2%. Well, we didn't reach 2%. We were at 2.5%. But the problem is they wanted to spur growth because the job numbers were very worrying. A lot of the jobs created in the Biden administration were low-paying part-time jobs and most particularly government jobs, and that's where a lot of the spending went to try to create jobs. The government should not be in the job-creating business as far as the overall economy is concerned. Going back to the headline from New York Post here, Senator Roger Marshall demands testimony from labor stats boss over monster 818,000 jobs revision. I have text from this now. So there you go. The economy is in very poor shape. We technically aren't in a recession as the previous definition stated, but nobody wants to admit that because saying we're in a recession would spook the market. So we're not in a recession. So, I mean, technically we are in a recession. So growth is the issue. We're trying to spur growth by cutting rates. However, if you looked at history, when you do this, the risk is of inflation going up. And sometimes you could get into a hyperinflationary cycle, which happened in the 80s. They cut rates too soon, and inflation went back up to 8%. That's the worry. Half a point, we'll see. So today the market opened higher, trading was very brisk, and that's good because people are excited to borrow money. Because the rates go down, people need to do things, but they're not going to borrow at higher rates. All right, One American News headline, House fails to pass 6-month government spending. Just the News failed continuing resolution. It's not really a budget, it's a CR, which the SAVE Act was attached to. The vote represents another loss for Speaker Johnson's leadership. The House voted 202 to 220 to kill the continuing resolution that had the SAVE Act attached to it. Total of 14 Republicans voted against it. I don't know why. The resolution, along with 206 Democrats, while 3 Democrats voted across the aisle to support the bill, 2 Republicans voted present. So that's, 16 Republicans didn't vote for it. So the SAVE Act was a non-citizen voting bill. So it said, and that's why nobody wanted to vote for it, that illegals can't vote. Some people had a problem with trying to initiate this too close to an election would cause election problems that we don't need. And there is some logic in that. But the fact is that illegals shouldn't be voting. And so anybody that wouldn't vote for a bill that says illegals can't vote, and they go, well, there's already a federal bill, but the SAVE Act would make voter ID mandatory with proof of citizenship. The problem is that, as I stated many times, there's no way to call out people that aren't citizens. If they somehow register to vote through motor voter or whatever, they have a driver's license, nobody has citizen cards. Nobody has voting cards. And that goes back to real ID, which I really don't agree with because it's a government ID, but there has to be. And this is the problem also, when you register to vote, there's no requirement to prove you're a citizen. Same thing with getting a driver's license. You don't have to be a citizen to get a driver's license. So where is the proof of citizenship required? There's a federal law that says you can't vote in federal elections if you're not a citizen, but there's no guard against that along the way. There's no enforcement. All right, this is from One American News. If you don't watch The View, which you shouldn't, Whoopi Goldberg and Sonny Hostin criticized Brittany Mahomes' GOP support citing her interracial marriage. This is what I don't like about The View, and I really don't like about major networks. It's racist to criticize anybody's voting record or statement, political statements based on their race. Just like when Joe Biden said, you know, if you have a hard time deciding to vote for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Anything like that is racist. So we know Whoopi Goldberg is racist, and so is Sonny Hostin. 2 supposedly black anchors or hosts on The View criticize a white woman because she's married to a black guy. There is no basis. Because my brother watches MSNBC, he said to me before, I don't know if he believes us now, all Republicans are racist. Where does he get that? And the story goes on to say that Mahomes should know better. Hostin's statement was mocked on social platforms, with conservative commentators asking how Hostin has ever been capable of achieving a law degree with her ignorant, divisive point of view. I agree. New York Post. Hochul's favorability falls below Trump's among New York voters. I mean, that's not surprising. Hochul was... I don't think she beat Lee Zeldin. I don't think she beat Lee Zeldin in the race for governor of New York. I don't believe it. I think there was funny business going on there as well. I think New York is a supermajority. I'm not sure. And here, as I said I was going to get into, FBI director says his agency has disrupted second Chinese hacking group efforts. And as I stated from the Federalist, and they said the Russian election interference bullshit is meant to chill conservative alternative media. Indeed it is, because the fact is that Chinese infiltration, hacking, whether it's in the elections or anything else, mind you, is 100 score more than Russia, or all the other infiltration, election interference combined compares to China. The story goes on to say FBI Christopher Wray has announced that they have disrupted a second major Chinese hacking group, which goes by the name Flax Typhoon. On Wednesday, Wray spoke at the Aspen Cyber Summit in Washington, D.C., where he said that the U.S. agency stopped the second Chinese hacking group's ongoing efforts while recovering thousands of compromised devices in what he described as just one round in a much longer fight. He also noted Flax Typhoon was being controlled by a larger Chinese company called Integrity Technology Group. The company collected intelligence and performed reconnaissance for Chinese government security agencies while posing as an IT firm. According to Ray, Flax Typhoon routed the malicious traffic through a network of hijacked devices known as botnet. But this isn't reported in mainstream media. It's on OAN. Because mainstream media is Russia, Russia, Russia all the time. And if you start talking about China, you're diminishing the narrative that Russia is the big enemy of the United States. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, share the podcast, leave a comment. Give me a thumbs up. I just wanted to state once again, in some housekeeping, I will not be posting tomorrow through next week. I may have a special report when I come back on Saturday. I'm going away in a much needed respite. Just generally, when I go on vacation, I do not engage the internet. And as I said many times, I don't really engage the internet except looking at news throughout the day. I'm not a big social media guy. Sometimes I put my phone in a drawer in the glove compartment of my car and I go on a hike. I enjoy the real world. And so when I go on vacation, I don't really engage screens at all. I do have my phone. I don't really look at it, but I don't watch TV. I don't look at my phone. I don't get on my computer. But who knows? I may post something. Perry wants me to post some old episodes of Tuesdays with Perry. I might do that. So throughout the week, we'll see. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Join me. I usually go live Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on Rumble, but not next week. Stay hip to the trick, and I'll see you in a week. Respect.
Are you implying here some kind of conspiracy?